Yes. Well, welcome everybody online. Specifically, welcome to this cozy and intimate setting. We are in Antwerp, Belgium, in the Havenhuis. It is called. It's a sort of box where we all sit and can discuss and talk. At this moment, it's difficult to describe what this is, but welcome anyway. So I'm going to be mainly the master of ceremony. And we were going to talk about, as was introduced by Zoe, about slow science. We will have 5 minutes very shortly to introduce ourselves to each other. I think that is a nice thing to do so that we at least know who is there online and present in the room. And then we have 4 statements I would like us to discuss. And I think every one of you received those statements in beforehand. And we will have 15 minutes for each statement. So we have more or less an hour the time to discuss a very big agenda and very important agenda, I think. So I will quickly call your name, and then you can tell me the correct pronunciation of your name and also your affiliation from which Young Academy you are. So I'm Sander de Ridder. I'm from the Young Academy of Belgium. And then I would like to start with Eva.
Yes, hello. Eva Lucic is my name. I am a historian and I'm an elected member of the Swedish Young Academy or Young Academy of Sweden.
Thank you. Welcome. Sandro?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sandro Carnicelli. Sound Italian, but I'm actually from Brazil. And I'm a member of the Young Academy of Scotland, and I'm a professor of tourism and leisure studies.
Thank you. Timo?
So, hi. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I'm Timo de Wolf. I'm from the German Young Academy. I'm a mathematician working at TU in Braunschweig.
Robbie?
Hello, everyone. I'm Robbie Einsen-Price. I'm a filmmaker and science communicator, and I'm from the Swiss Young Academy.
Thank you. Linda?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm here online. My name is Linda Grin, and I'm also a member of the Young Academy from the Belgian part. And I actually left academia, so now I'm working as a scientist at the Red Cross Flanders.
Thank you. And then our last participant is Sarah, who is also in the room here. And Annelies, of course, yeah.
So I'll go first.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Verhulst. I'm at Ghent University and the Belgian Young Academy, and I work on hearing technologies.
Okay, and then last but not least, Annelies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annelies van de Ven. It was supposed to be my colleague Douta who is here, but unfortunately she is sick today. And I'm cheating on multiple fronts because I'm not part of any Young Academy, and I'm actually based at UC Louvain, so in Bologna. But I'm happy to be here today as a bit of a representative of the Slow Science Belgium and the doctoral school that we organize every year.
And has just become a mother a couple of days ago, I think. Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, she's here on my lap, but I'm hoping you won't be able to hear her.
Congratulations. Let's delve into the first statement topic we have. I will read it, and then please feel free to react or comment. We can see whether the people online raise their digital hands, so probably that's the best thing to do. Raise your digital hands, and then I can give you the floor. And for the people who are in the room, just raise your hands, and then I will let you speak. So topic 1, statement 1, is a very broad one, I think. There is still a lack of understanding in academia, as opposed to the industry, that a healthy environment, so an environment that creates less stress, that offers time for rest and exercise, leads to more productivity. How can we overcome this? Well, I will let you react, but I think first and foremost, it's already and also important to define what we mean here with productivity. What precisely is productivity? What should we focus upon, and how can our universities be more healthy environments for us to work in? Please, if you have any comments or ideas, go ahead and raise your hands. Sandro, and then I will give the floor to Timo.
Okay, I can break the ice just so people are shy. But I feel that I think for me the most important thing is to make sure that universities and academia are a healthy environment. And again, reflect about what does productivity means. But I think what we've seen recently is that a lot of people leaving, a lot of brilliant people leaving academia and leaving universities because they feel that there's no life-work balance. There is a lot of toxic environments and things like that. So my concern is not necessarily with productivity, but how we can actually make sure that we create healthy work environments so brilliant people that we have in the system stay instead of draining away.
Thank you. Timo, and then I will give the floor to Eva.
Okay. So first of all, I would say the answer is yes, that there is a lack of understanding still. And it's true that this is not the case in other fields like in industry. And I think, I mean, first of all, in order to overcome this, I mean, it's important to raise awareness about that this is even a thing, that a lot of people on the one hand struggle with it, but on the other hand, also that it has a lot of benefits, that if people have time to say private time, or if they have time to exercise, etc., that it is good for their well-being and in the end for their productivity. So I think this is really a main point that I see in terms of, let's say, my advisors and their advisors generation who are still active and often in positions, let's say, where they take final decisions about things, that it is very important to communicate. It's not about just we want to work less and have more free time and an easier life, because this will not be implemented. At least not in, let's say, the foreseeable future. But if we can communicate that this sort of productivity is not sinking, but everybody is feeling better, living a healthier life, but still can do actual good science, maybe better science, then I think there is real opportunity to change things.
Yeah, thank you. Eva, and then I will give the floor to Linda and Annelies.
Yes, thank you. And I probably missed, like in my presentation, I'm a historian. I'm associate professor of history, so I just as a compliment. I think one thing about this misunderstanding, or I don't know if it is a misunderstanding or a lack of willingness to accept certain things in academia, and I think we need to demystify academic work and go away from the notion of these vocations. Being an academic means having a vocation, dedicate all our lives to work. I mean, there are certain people that do this, but that kind of creates an image about academics, researchers, professors as these crazy people who don't have any space for alternative time consumption, yeah, or resource consumption. I think this is a bad thing because it is getting misused by universities who very often function as companies, yeah, or corporations. So one thing here is, for example, the flexible time, working time, yeah. Okay, we have flexible working time. We have also long holidays if we want, but that has kind of spilled over in being or working all the time, being available all the time. And I think that is something which we academics also need to be very clear with, to set boundaries within this space of freedom, yeah, which is always interpreted as something good. I think work-life balance in terms of not only flexible work hours, but more structured working time in academia is something really important. But I think also there needs to be also a gendered perspective on this, yeah. So how does academia work for women who want to have family life? Yeah. And how does academia work for male colleagues? And now this is not to promote some kind of, extravagant feminist approach, but also to be aware of this is not a flat issue. Yeah. Here are issues of power that overlap also with gender inequality. And then, of course, also another issue about productivity. This is really very much about the bibliometrics. Yeah, I mean, being productive in academia sometimes really takes time. Gut Ding braucht Weil, as usually our German colleagues say. But what does it mean? I mean, I feel like all the more this pressure to kind of recycle your own, because I mean, productive and new thinking being at the research frontier, it takes time. You know, it takes time to think and to let things become ripe for issues. And if we are chased by bibliometrics in order to keep our position, to be tenured or to keep a tenured position, then we really run the risk of really lowering this innovative thinking, which academia should be about. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Keep in mind the concept of demystifying academic work. That is a very interesting one, and we can maybe talk about this a bit more later. But first, I would like to give the floor to Linda, then Annelies, and then Robbie.
Thank you. There have been said some things that I do not necessarily agree with, and I can say this as I have had a long academic career, and now I'm on the other side, where I can say all is well, for real. There's still science going on, there's still a lot of innovation going on, so life doesn't end after academic. Is the pressure still on? Definitely. So for me, it's more really emphasizing that the challenges that we're facing as a society, not only as academics, it's really a society-wide issue. A lot of people are suffering from burnout. A lot of people are complaining about life-work balance. I think it's more really about we are not teaching our students how to enter a company as a good employee. We are not teaching people how to be good employers. That is a society-broad issue. It's not only something that it happens in academic. When I look, for instance, also at the productivity that was mentioned, it's one thing to define productivity as saying that you're doing science. But the thing is about in an academic setting, an academic institution is made up of a lot of smaller companies, which we call research groups. And these research groups, they often do not have a lot of funding to employ, for instance, an HR manager. They don't have somebody to call a project manager or somebody to do assistant work. And that's a bit of issue that hampers the productivity of somebody who calls himself a scientist. They often find themselves doing a lot of tasks that are not necessarily related to their own background. And thus, they have to start anew, they have to learn new things, etc., which can also be a double-edged sword, because it means when you have done a PhD or even a postdoc in an academic institution, you have had a lifetime of experience in a very small amount of time. You were able to do not only your scientific work, you were able to do, for instance, also project management, you were able to do financing. So it's really a double-edged sword. And I think it's one thing to say that there's a lot of pressure on being an academic researcher, but it really also comes with a lot of useful tools that you can employ later on when you decide to leave academic. So I really want to make some kind of statement here that it's not only academic researchers that are experiencing these things. This is a society-broad challenge that we need to face, but it starts indeed with how we teach our students to be good employees. And I think that's something that we really need to make sure that when somebody enters their first job, whether it's in a company or whether it's in an academic setting, that they realize what is a good environment and what is a safe environment and what is a toxic environment. I think that's what I really want to contribute to this first statement here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And indeed, I think the Slow Science has written about this, that is Slow Science movement tries to be critical of a all-encompassing neoliberal logic that exists in society and that is taken over by universities and scientific practice. So thank you very much for a reminder that this is indeed a societal issue, a broader issue than only, being focused on universities or the practice of doing academic research. Annelies, please, the floor is yours. Annelies, we can't hear you. You have to put on your microphone.
Yes. Sorry. My child is also crying in the background, so apologies. yeah, now that everyone else has spoken, I feel like what I was going to say has gotten bigger, so I'll try and keep it very small. The first thing that I wanted to say is I am a bit wary of productivity just as a term. I understand that it's very important for funders and for university governance that we use the language that they, ascribe value to, I guess. But I do think there's something to be said about joy in research, about creativity, about collaboration. Like there's so many other words that we could be using as well to describe kind of the positive outcomes. I heard, I think it was Eva say innovation as well. There's all these other terms that we also need to think about when we think about having a well-being as one of the highest values in how we structure academic careers and academic work. I think it was Gabor Kismiuk, who's one of the leaders of the Research Mental Health Observatory. So it's REMO, it's a cost action. And he said in a presentation that one of the great things about academic research is that a lot of us are very passionate about what we do. We very strongly identify with our work. But after saying that, he also said that one of the terrible things about academia is that we're also passionate about what we do and we strongly identify with our work. And that also makes it really hard. It means that it sometimes gets taken advantage of to justify precarity. This isn't just something in academia. I do archaeology, so I see it in like the cultural sector as well. It's often sectors that are that suffer from kind of underfunding or under-resourcing. And also the poor structuring and work patterns that I think Eva also brought up. Those cause a lot of mental health issues, and we can sometimes be fed a narrative that if we raise these issues of toxicity and of mental health, that we should be grateful for the opportunity that we have in the sector because jobs are so scarce. So instead of the concern being acknowledged and the achievement being acknowledged and your expertise being acknowledged at that moment, it's kind of like you have to grin and bear it, because if you're not willing to, someone else will be. And I think that narrative is really also part of the problem, and the fact that a lot of people do end up buying into that narrative. And it also becomes an individual problem, because if it's one person coming up and saying, this isn't okay, my situation personally, my personal mental health, this is what I'm struggling with, then it's very easy also to put that narrative onto that person and be like, well, then, maybe you're not cut out for this. Whereas I think one of the more, I guess, positive ways of responding to this is that if we raise our voices together, and if we have debates like this one, and if we have things like Researcher Mental Health Observatory that does actual research into how mental health is affected by the academic environment, and if we have things like doctoral schools talking about it, then that means you can't individualize the problem anymore. And it does become something that we can deal with as a sector, even though it's a very slow-moving train sometimes. There is change that can happen. So maybe that's a bit of a positive note to end on.
Thank you. I will then give the floor to Robbie. I see two more hands, but I will just let you then quickly react after Robbie, because I would also like to have some time for the other statements. But Robbie, go ahead, because we haven't heard from you.
Thank you. And yeah, great to hear everyone's thoughts on this. For me, what stands out in the question is how does a healthy environment lead to more productivity? The problem here for me is that productivity is perhaps well defined in academia, but not by academics per se. Rather, the metrics through which we either get jobs or don't get jobs are what will define our productivity. And I believe that is actually blocking, that is itself blocking a healthy work environment. And so really to reanalyze what we want to achieve in science and academia is the way that we push forward. For me, productivity should be perhaps a result of doing good science and kind of verifying what is good science. Does it always have to be a positive finding? Can negative findings be equally good? science, I believe it should be, and this is a key aspect of that. And for me, the current metrics are simply not allowing us to have the space that we need to have a healthy work environment. I hear everyone talk about innovation and passion for science, and I think these metrics are so inhibiting for things that we stand by as scientists, and so that needs to change. Maybe a grassroots movement within academia to try and shape science in a way that we would want it shaped.
Yeah.
Quick intervention from the audience.
Yeah, I would like to add on that. I think you need to expand on what it means to add value. I think being, for example, a scientist who helps other scientists to be good scientists, like being a mentor, could be as valuable as doing research, for example, or writing articles which end up in the media could be as valuable as publishing in an academic journal. Being department chair could be as valuable as doing research. And we indeed narrowed it down to publishing in scientific journals. But there are so many things that we do. Just being here is adding value to our lives as being scientists, because we're talking about certain things, but we will never write this in our CVs when we will apply for, I mean, a little bit, I see, like, but we will, I mean, it's like, at least in my field, it's less appreciated, let's put it like this. So it's like, it has to be, they are opening it up, but it's still for me way too narrow, and it should be there should be almost no boundaries in what it means to be an academic at our university. There are so many ways to contribute to the university that are not purely producing science, I think.
Okay, a quick reaction from Eva, maybe?
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate all the things that have been taken up and brought up. I really like the idea of us or our position as senior researcher having a responsibility to change also the culture and the environment in academia, to teach, to say to the students, not to create an environment which is exploitative, but really to have this also grassroots, but also top-down approach. That things take time. I was just a short note on productivity. Now, as a historian, we always can come around something. We can add some new empirical perspectives on things and like that. So it's not the problem. But I have been thinking about my colleagues in the natural sciences, and then they dedicate 4 years of research to some kind of causality which they think might work, and it turns out it does not work. Let me see, like breastfeeding does not lead to less risk for certain allergies. I've seen this case. And then what do you do? How do you publish these results which are negative results? You build on something which is which is supposed to be positive, but it turns out negative. And I think daring to do such type of works, to say there is no correlation, there is something, we have negative results, it is not as we thought or assumed. I think that can also change the understanding of productivity in academia. And I totally agree, going beyond the mere scientific peer-reviewed articles, but also embrace the issue of community and collegiality. I think we would very much profit from this, not only by giving, but we gain also very much by reading our colleagues' texts, even though if they're not related to our research. We gain breath, fresh air in our own research. That is just a matter of fact.
Okay, thank you, Eva. I would like to go to the second statement that more or less has connections to what we have been discussing. I would like us to think about the pressure to publish, which is still, I think, very enormous and overwhelming. And it's, again, only one very limited metric, I think, to value scientific work. And there are many people who like to change this pressure. to publish a lot, so in terms of quantity. But in order to do so, we need to handle the problem that more people would like to stay in academia than there are resources for permanent positions. This creates an endless cycle of more competition, unhealthy competition, I would say. So how can we handle this? Are there other alternative forms of science communication possible? Additionally, related to the publishing aspect, do we truly value quality over quantity? And does this aspect vary between disciplines? I see, first of all, the hand of Linda and then Sandro. And then also someone from the audience here. But Linda, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I would like to say that start with science is an activity. It's rather a methodology. It's not a certain profession. We as academics, we tend to use it as a sort of profession, but actually you can also be a scientist in a company, you can be a researcher doing stuff for commercial purposes. So let it be clear that if you are a person who is very curious of nature and you'd like to investigate stuff through a very rigid methodology, you can do it in a lot of settings. So I think it's very important when we are teaching students to be good scientists. And to be a good scientist means that you can employ this methodology in a good and qualitative kind of way. I think it's important to show them the other side of the academic wall. For instance, if I can recall my own experiences, everything was done within the university, everything was done within the Institute for Research. There were no internships in pharmaceutical companies, there were no internships in governmental bodies, which is a pity, because it really, you grow up with the idea of, oh, I'm very curious by nature and I want to do this stuff and I want to gather new knowledge. And you get the idea through your training at a university setting, you get the idea that this can only be done as an academic researcher. And I think it's like you say, the fact a lot of people want to stay in academia, not because academia is so wonderful, no, because they like the activity of being curious, they like the activity of investigating stuff, of generating new knowledge. And I think it's really up to universities to really embed themselves much more in a lot of societal stakeholders, such as industrial partners, such as governmental partners, to really open up the eyes of people and show them that there are certain settings that really allow you to exert the same activities that you enjoy. I think that would be a very, very good place to start as academics also, to really open up through collaborations. I think a lot of us, when you have students, you do a collaboration with with an industrial partner, and then after their PhD, they even get to work over there. They never come back to you and say like, oh, I wish I had stayed. None of them do, almost none of them do. So I think that in its sense should be a very strong signal to us as, well, I'm a former academic researcher, but especially to you, that really there is a lot of good stuff out there as well. And it's a responsibility of the university to really pave the way towards these other positions.
Okay, thank you. So I'll give the floor to Sandro, then Sarah, and then Annelies.
So thank you. I think, as you said, I think the questions are quite related. I think for me, in terms of the concept of productivity, is also relational, right? So it's what your employee expects you to achieve, is what you expect to achieve, what you agree in terms of that, job agreement, but it's also what the sector expects you to achieve. So in many ways, like I always, or most of the academics end up doing lots of other things beyond what has been agreed between my employer and myself on my activity plans or so on. So I think it's important to do that. And the question sometimes I ask in academia is, why do we always try to do beyond what actually is agreed by your university? Because a lot of people try to go beyond. And I think for me, there is all those, one of the points that Robert mentioned, which is these metrics that are very negative and very problematic in many sense of achievement. A lot of you may have seen the top 2% scientists that has been circulating this week. And I had a huge debate in the tourism forum saying, what does top means? is that who publishes more, who gets cited more, who makes more social transformations, who's working better with communities. What does actually top mean? And the problem for me with that is that it leads to some new narratives, and it leads to inequalities. It leads to opportunities for those people brand that top 2%, that, for example, people who have been on maternity leave or parental leave don't have because they've been absent from work for a certain time. But the people who have been, and that's the gender inequality that Eva mentioned in the beginning, people who have produced more because of whatever social context they are in, they are the ones who get invited to be keynote speakers. They are the ones that usually develop their social capital more often. They are usually those ones that get invited to new projects, and that becomes a snowball of privilege, right? And the thing is, how we change that is an important point.
Okay, thank you. I will go to Sarah, then Annelies and Timo. Sarah,
Yes.
please.
On the note of change, I think there are a couple of organizations who are really starting to understand the problem of publish or perish. For example, the ERC application schemes from this year onwards ask you to list your 10 most important publications. Some European universities in their promotion schemes are taking this. And I do think that when the ERC sets an example like this, that this is going to flow forward into university evaluations and grant agencies. So I think this is a very good starting point where change can, will, and is happening. On the other aspect, I would like to say that, for example, I'm in engineering, but I don't publish a lot. What I've learned from my mentor is do good science and write good papers. And I've been taught to have trust in that process. And for me, when I compare my CV to my engineering colleagues, I maybe only publish 1/5 or so. It does, but for me, this doesn't matter. I cannot do my research in any other way than I do it. And I have a standard of quality that is my standard. And if a grant agency doesn't buy into that, well, then bad luck. I think we really need to teach our students that that it's okay to do good science, and that if you want to get there and get your promotions, that you will find your way to do so. I hope that with these new instruments of evaluation that this change is set in, but it's also up to us to believe that it is possible and look at the people and around who made it possible and give those examples to your students rather than pushing for publishing. I stepped away from this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Important intervention. And so I will give the floor to Annelies, then Timo. Someone from the audience has a comment, and then Robbie. But Annelies, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo, I guess, one of the things that Sarah said. You use the ERC as an example, but there's the DORA, so the Declaration of Research Assessment, which I think a lot of universities have signed. So they've signed to say that they're going to try and, put metrics lower down on the way that they evaluate their researchers. And also the new kind of COARA, the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment, which is also at an EU level. Once again, trying to find ways that are not just these bibliometrics of determining what value is in research. So echoing what Sarah said, that there are things that are changing, and it's very, again, slow-moving train, but there are signed documents that universities should be abiding by. That doesn't mean that in practice they all are. We all know that when people go up for tenure, for example, that they still do get asked, which international journals have you published in? Oh, if I compare you to this person, why should I hire you if you're publishing less? Those are still the realities that we're faced with. But like has been said already, if kind of there's a change in the narrative coming from the funders, especially, that it does come through in the end. And if we keep echoing that also strengthens it. I think what Linda was saying about about collaborating also with things that are outside of academia is a really, really important point, because it's about valuing research that comes from another place. I think you can also develop much more creatively if you work with people who come from a different background or work in a different industry than you. I think there's so much value to that. But also showing the relevance of what we're doing. I think collaborating with community groups, with other sectors, with other businesses, that there's also potential resources that could come out of the woodwork there, not just for academia, but for research more generally. So I do think looking at research in that kind of wider bubble of not just what's happening in academia, but more broadly, that does also challenge that scarcity narrative that we have, if we see it in that way and we try and think of it more as a collaboration. Yeah, and then I just wanted to also say how much I agree with the point that came from the audience earlier about, you know, being a good public science communicator or doing schools outreach or being a good administrator in your group, a great mentor. Those are all things that should be seen as great, you know, in assessment of our research, as things that are productive, as things that are good, as things that make us great researchers. So I think that's a narrative we also kind of need to put higher up, and then maybe lower the volume on the scarcity narrative, and focus instead on collaboration and on different ways of making value.
Thank you. Timo.
Yes, thanks a lot. So first of all, I would like to say that I very much agree with what Linda said earlier in terms of opportunities outside of academia, and that it needs to be communicated more. And also what Sarah just said in terms of that, let me summarize that good publications matter. So I think I can definitely say this from my field, that I think few but strong publications that really have an impact, change things, are seen and matter very much. But it's true, it's a risk, right? I mean, I think this is just how to put it, right? I mean, if you go for the big goals, then it means a risk, and there is a chance of fail, and I think it's just, I mean, I think it's a good thing to do it, but we should be transparent about it. So and maybe this is then more like of a tactical questions. Maybe I am aiming for one big publication, but maybe I'm also making sure that I have some other projects on the side, such that I'm not completely unproductive if this thing goes wrong. But I think this is something to discuss with our mentors, or discuss in a group, or with our colleagues. To the main question about how can we maybe make academia less competitive. Actually, I think the question, maybe it's the wrong question in the sense that I feel like we can't really. So the sad answer maybe is that we can't, in the sense that I think it is a fact that there will always not be enough resources in academia, and there will always be plenty of people who would like to do what we want to do. But I think the question is rather about, like, how can we organize ourselves as researcher to not make it a hostile environment, but a productive one. And to me, I mean, they often said like it's a toxic environment. I feel like this is not exactly, at least to me, the right description. It's more like, I feel it is like the jungle. So I also tell this to my students. I feel it's like the jungle. It's a very dangerous environment to be in. It's kind of hostile, but not because it's like toxic. It's more about like, yeah, there's a lot of things that might kill you, and then like maybe you want to like look out for each other. And I think this is more important, right? In terms of like the team that you are working in, that you are working with, and also the colleagues that you're being with. I mean, we are in this together. So let's make sure that we look out for each other in the jungle and still have fun exploring it, and being excited about it. And maybe let me make a point here, and then later come back if there's anything to add.
Okay, we have a quick comment from the audience, and then Robbie, and then 2 more hands for quick comments, please.
Thanks, Sander. Concerning the evaluation criteria, just to make a quick comment about who's applying them. So one hand is funders, and this is and there's been some very good improvements in that direction. I've personally had some good experiences recently well, as a social scientist in the medical sciences. I have to explain to people who's published in Nature why I'm not publishing in Nature, but I probably never will. But anyway. But the bigger problem, I think, there is, so one thing is convincing funders, the other thing is convincing governments. And education or science ministries, because particularly in Flanders, a large chunk of research funding for universities comes from the government. We're in a way lucky, more so than in other countries. And so to determine the amount of that funding to universities, they use the typical criteria, which is publications, impact factors, so citations, PhDs who have defended their dissertation. So how many PhDs you have published? And this is what the university is evaluated on. And the universities pass on these criteria to us individual researchers, in the worst case, in a slightly better case to the research group. So as a team, you can achieve those. So even if our National Science Foundation, the FWO, applies nice criteria to us, it does, in an extreme way, it doesn't matter so much, because our university, to give us tenure or to just give us some more structural research funding, still wants us to meet those other criteria. And the issue here is we can convince science funders, maybe, what I mean, the issue is who advocates on our behalf towards governments. The science funders are not doing it. It's not in their interest. Why do they need to advocate to governments to fund universities in a different way? They also benefit from our publication drive. So we need to do it. I think there is a way for academies to do that. I think they have an important role in this. But so that's an important communication line that is still not there enough. And I really support what Timo just said about competition not being such a dirty word maybe, or excellence. We've discussed this among us. It's not about avoiding competition, but making it less hostile, as you said. And I think I really like that.
Thank you. Robbie, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to touch on Timo's point as well. I think the idea of competition, yeah, we can't get away from that, and that's okay. But I love this metaphor of the we should be having fun in this jungle, and that we should be looking out for each other in this jungle. I really like that as a model for how science could be. And I also want to touch on Sandro's mention of this 2% top scientists, and I find it quite shocking to hear something like that and read something like that, because we have this narrow narrow expectation of what a scientist should be in terms of how we evaluate them. And what I think we are maybe in danger of doing is creating some sort of Matthew effect here, in that Matthew effect is, it's disputed as to how real this effect is, but those who have some shall have more. This idea that if you start with something, you'll accrue greater advantage over time. And so we have these scientists with the top 2%. If we're publishing, articles like this, I really think it could damage science, in the sense that, yes, sure, they're doing good science, but we are creating a hierarchy, and in terms of with this very limited evaluation of what it is to be the best scientist. And so we are progressing these scientists, and we're perhaps limiting the diversity of ideas, limiting the diversity of ways of doing science by creating a bottleneck like this. And for me, it almost kind of starts to send us in the direction of AI, where, the most commonly, the average idea is the one that is produced, as opposed to the diversity of ideas that science is powered by. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Maybe two very short comments from Eva and Linda before we go to the next statement.
I think it has been already raised in the audience, but I think one issue how to introduce some changes is to engage as members of academies, not only on the national but also transnational level. And why not issue a charter on, the importance of slowness in academia, the importance of slow academia, slow science. I think that is our major function here as members of young academies, to engage with research policy on multiple levels and scales, and not only national ones. I mean, here in Sweden, we are trying to to talk to funders and to state funding agency, 3 years is not enough to write a project and to write a book, you know, and to initiate. I mean, once you start reading, coming into field, then you realize, oh, I have to write a report because the time is up. Yeah. So I think, I mean, there are certain issues on the national level which have to be addressed as members of the academia, but also on the transnational level in forms like charters and, you know, making very clear statements and communicating them towards governments, but also towards funding agencies, national, transnational ones, and towards the public.
Thank you. Linda.
Yeah, I would just like to put some more weight back on the publications. I think now for a lot of us, publication has gotten like this bittersweet aftertaste, but in essence, actually, science is generating new knowledge. New knowledge should be documented. Documentation happens for us in publications, and it should, of course, as Sarah rightly pointed out, it should be according to a very high quality, a standard of quality. But it is true, it is a form of currency that we use to showcase to others, like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing research, and these are the topics that I'm interested. So this is the area of expertise I'm active in. But it's true that not everything can immediately lead to a publication. Not everything can immediately lead to an instant gratification in the sense of a patent and whatnot. So I think to really have this, and I think Timo rightly pointed out, so it's really about taking care of each other. Science doesn't happen by one single person. We're not Isaac Newtons, we are not Niels Bohrs. We're really people who are doing science in very collaborative situations. And we should look out for each other by creating new currencies to showcase the quality of the research that we're doing. And I think, for instance, having good data sets, like doing bioarchive, but also having very good expertise. Somebody can be much better at science communication for children than somebody else, for elderly people or for blind people. I think what we can invest in is really making new currencies. So maybe we should focus next to the publications, which should, of course, be the first and foremost priority of documentation. We should also maybe invent our own kind of scientific Bitcoin as a currency to showcase our expertise.
Thank you. Good idea. I would like to go to the third statement. We are a very diverse group of people here, at least in terms of the disciplines we come from. And we often state that the diversity of disciplines, think about the differences in working and in how scholarship works in humanities versus biology, that it limits the feasibility for implementing structural changes that would contribute to a healthier environment benefiting everyone and ultimately society as well, of course. But can we not reverse this perspective? Is it conceivable that these disciplinary variations stimulate constructive discourse and, instead of acting as constraints, serve as catalysts for progress towards solutions? And if so, how do we get started? Very complex question, I think, but an important one. Timo?
Maybe I can start, and maybe I can try to connect it a little bit also with a few things from the last 2 points. So, I mean, of course, in a certain sense, it's already starting, right? I mean, having this discussion like this, but I think it's very important to distinguish, on the one hand, the time before being tenured and the time after being tenured. Because maybe I can share like 1 or 2 anecdotes. So number one was so I have a tenured position now since a few years back, and one really changing moment was for me right after I got this position, that I was basically still being in the mindset of before being basically being on a hunt for a tenured position. And then thought, okay, it's just continuing, right? Now I need to secure grants. Now I need to secure like being visible in my community, et cetera, et cetera. And then I got advice from a person randomly meeting at someone and saying like, no, you're tenured. You can do whatever you want. And that was a very good advice. Yeah? I think like in the moment when you're tenured, you should really like take it to heart and say like, okay, like I will do what I believe in, and what I believe is good science. and then hopefully this is good quality, right? I agree with everything that was said before. I mean, of course, this should be our goal, to produce things that have an impact, that matter, and that are of high quality. And so, okay, this is like, but I see there is this, you have to be tenured first. But the second thing I think about, like being on a hunt for a tenure position, now also being sometimes on the other side of it, two things that I would share from my experience is number one, often we talk about the let's say the output, the number of publications, citations, etc. And certainly this matters. But in the end, it's really hiring committees that decide. And so it's, I would say from my perspective, we should be aware that this is still, it's a process that is inherently unfair because it's subjective. And it means that if there are certain people in hiring committees or in the field that are just influential, that means that people coming from their groups will have a better shot in order to get a tenured position. And of course, it helps to have a lot of citations, and it helps to have a lot of publications, and it helps to have like published in top journals, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end of the day, it's all no guarantee. So I think the only thing that really helps, from my perspective, if you want to plan it, is to believe in what you do early on and do good work, and then take it outside, and then it might work or it might not. But in the end of the day, and this is like the last anecdote to share, and then I will stop, is I had a point in my postdoc career, like I was for 3 years in the US, and like somewhat in the middle, I had a point where I was like really very much down, and I thought like I might quit, because so I felt like the living standard is lower than it was at the end of my PhD, like earning less money, living in this little wooden house that has like all like these entries. There's like all these bucks and taxes, right? I mean, like whatever. And then you have to move again. It's uncertainty, etc. But at this point, I realized that still I am in there because I want to. You know, so like there is a very easy way to make this stop. It's just say I don't want this anymore, and it will stop tomorrow, right? You can just be out tomorrow. But in the end, I mean, I stayed because I feel like this is the place where I want to be, and so then that kind of helped me at least to like get along with this time until getting tenure, on top of being convinced about what I do is valuable research. And if it is too much, as Linda said, there is a lot of other opportunities. We should not feel like this is a life without an alternative. There are lots of good alternatives. And it depends, it's really a life decision, I think also, right? I mean, maybe the academic environment in the end, at least as it is today, does not fit to your life goals. Okay, then change it. Like your life is more important than just your academic career. If it's not for you, then that's totally okay. And there's a lot of other ways to live a meaningful and impactful life.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure about the order, but I would like to ask you to maybe make short interventions, because we only have a few minutes left, and I would like us to very quickly talk about the final statement as well. But let's hear from Annelies, then Sandro, and then Linda for their short interventions. Thanks.
Okay, super short then. I say, I loved what you said about doing what you believe in, Timo, and I think that should be absolutely after tenure. Maybe there's less risk, but it's also something that I think early career researchers should be hearing more often, perhaps. And like you say, you know, if then the academy decide, or if that impacts you negatively in your academic prospects, then there are other places that you can go, and you can still do what you believe in a different place. So those are messages maybe we should be giving more to our young academics, rather than the idea that the only value you can bring is through being a researcher in the academic sphere. I think that puts a lot of undue pressure. And then as an archaeologist, I think that interdisciplinary, like the idea that it would be hindering is so counterintuitive to me. Having different disciplinary backgrounds, but any kind of, you know, intersectional diversity can only make our responses and our approaches to the problem more diverse as well, which just means that we have more opportunities to create a sector that we all feel more proud of being part of. So yeah, I think having initiatives like today, but also just keeping those connections and taking them from a short-term, one-day debate to a long-term collaboration, or finding your people outside of only your own discipline and really making sure that those connections last is so valuable. So yeah, I hope that everyone in that room, I'm sorry I can't be there, but I think it's so fantastic to have these kind of moments where you can all meet each other, and that's really part of how it's going to change for the better. It's not us talking in our silos, but it's us breaking out of those silos.
Thank you, Annelies. Sandro.
So just following from Annelies, obviously the role of young academies is there. I think we see now people who pass through the young academies becoming senior, becoming principals, rectors, or high position. So we do have these responsibilities of breaking marginalization processes, those negative metrics and toxic metrics that we see around. I think not only hiring committees that Timo said, but also promotion committees, and I've been now in many promotion committees and how we actually reflecting and changing those criteria in promotion committees. So I think, what we've seen here in Scotland is a lot of people who went through Young Academy of Scotland are now becoming very senior people in their universities and research centers and so on. And we do have the responsibility to not do the same that we suffered. So a lot of people who had struggles, we have the responsibility to make better to the others and not go with the narrative of, oh, I had to go through this, you should just cope. That doesn't exist, right? If the system were wrong for you, make better for the others. And I'm sorry, I need to leave really sharp now because I have another meeting now at 11 o'clock. So if it disappears, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Sandro. Linda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I think to come back really to the statement that you made about the different disciplines, I think we still need to start from what we have in common. We have in common that we're curious. We have in common that we use a certain systemic methodology. So in that sense, there's a lot to start together and to really not see them as very much different disciplines. But it's true that the current university settings, they really treat them as very different faculties that are very often not interlinked. They don't follow each other's courses and whatnot. And I think in the US system, for instance, you really have more freedom to create your own curriculum. So that would be very interesting to maybe have, for instance, natural sciences being exposed to more things about literature and arts and whatnot, and vice versa. And we can do a lot of things such as a hackathon, for instance, that remains a very important aspect in my point of view, that you can really bring people together with a certain goal and just be like, just do whatever you want. You have full liberty, but just do whatever you want. Find somebody with the same ID, regardless of your background, things will happen. So I think that would be a very good way to jumpstart what's being said here. But then I also like to come back to something that Timo said. For instance, now I'm applying for different jobs at different companies, and I can tell you hiring committees in the industrial setting, it's not very different. It's also about who you know and whatnot, and what's on your CV, what's not on your CV. So it's just to say it's not fairer on the other side. It's just part of the game, and it's a very human game. So maybe that's something that we really need to take out of the academic setting and just view it as something very human that's going on, and that will always be happening. So yeah.
Thank you. I would like us to shortly reflect on the final statement as well, because it incorporates the arts, which of course play a very important role in many of the young academies as well. And it's a quote from Robbie, who's also here, stating that good art takes time and persistence, but just as importantly, I also believe that it needs space, distance, and separation. What can academia and artistic research as well learn from the arts and artistic practice? How could it make academia a better place to work in? Yes, Robbie.
I can jump in since it was quote from me. For me, to keep it brief, it's for me, it's the unbound nature of how we do art. And it's the contrast between the boundaries that we have for doing science, and these boundaries are extremely important. And it's the contrast, internal contrast that your brain receives by just exploring artistically, and that's key for me, and that creates space. And I think that can bring innovation and exploration into science. And so for me, I always encourage with every scientist I work with, I say, what do you have an artistic practice, and what could you do? And I really feel like it's a necessary escape from the boundaries of science. So this is why I thought that.
Yeah, thank you. Linda.
Yeah, it's a good statement. It's a very bold statement as well, Robbie. So I like it very much, especially because I'm writing an essay on it right now. I think for now the zeitgeist is that science and arts have never been more opposed to one another than ever before. And it's a very, very strange evolution in human history that we regard somebody as an artist to be the complete opposite of a scientist, which is absolutely, I'm going to be very still polite here, but it's absolutely BS. We are creatures that are very curiosity driven. The only thing is that a scientist is often very interested in the outside world, whereas the artist will probably be more direct to the inner world, but we both want to understand the worlds that are around and within us, and we want to crystallize it either with very objective data or either with documenting subjective experiences. But we are doing the same thing. We are driven by curiosity, we are investigating things through certain methodologies, and we are documenting these aspects. And that's really what it's all about. And to me, it's I think what Robbie said, it's especially that which we are lacking today in science, is the freedom, to have freedom to create your own research question. It's freedom to do your research not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but to do 10 years, 15 years. That's what's lacking today is science. It's the freedom that is present. But saying that, it's of course that a lot of artists for now, they have a lot of freedom, but with that freedom comes also a price that they need to pay, and it's very often that they are not compensated fairly. The freedom comes with a very high price as well. So that's something that as scientists and artists that we really need to get the message out, that both are very, very crucial for the advancements of human knowledge and human innovation in general.
Yeah, thank you. I'll first go to Sarah and then give the floor back to Robbie. Sarah, please.
Yes, I think, the scientific process in itself is something where we owe it to ourselves to make sure that every week we have time for exploration and that we have time to do what we like doing the most. And I think it's super important that everybody sets this time in their agenda to do it. It's not the same as spending months and months, but if every week you feel that you're doing something that's really to the core of the scientific process, we need to all protect that. I think you can easily go on in this mill of performance and whatever, but if we lose this value, it's not going to be good for scientific evolution, let's say. So I think also the people around us in the universities and the funding agencies need to make sure that I need to understand that a large part of us staying motivated in our field, staying to contribute to the scientific process, is if we have time and space to do it. So let's try to keep on protecting this.
Yeah, I think very, very good advice. Robbie, I will give the floor to you now.
Yeah, very, very briefly, I just want to touch back on Linda's point that the construct that the expectations that we have for a scientist, I think potentially this idea of madness and virtuosity, and I feel like in art, there is the possibility for someone who would be considered to be outside of expectation or mad to not be accepted within the world of science, whereas in art it's supported the space for for you to become a virtuoso. And I think, you know, finding space for people who aren't within that expectation of what a scientist is important for science. And
thank you very much. I think that's a beautiful way to end, unless there are any very quick and final comments from anyone. No, then I would like to thank the contributors very much. I think it was a very interesting and engaging conversation.